All right, we'll call to order the November 16th, 2022 o'clock Franklin Tourism Commission meeting. Roll call. Ed Hopler.
Here.
Jeff Kadursky.
Here.
John Rucka here. Lance Shaver. Not here. Mark Wiley. Here. Barbara Wessner.
Here.
Okay. Number 2, citizen comment period. We do not have any citizens in the room. Item number 3, tourism budget refresher. So I brought tourism budget that we approved and went over. Last week.
He gave you one today.
Just a little bit of a refresher of what we discussed. We thought that our ending balance that we would have an ending balance of 253 gallons, that we would have an ending balance of 253K in the budget. We thought that we would budget flat for next year, so the 181K, and then with the 150,000 that will be paid, and then with the 150,000 that we'll be approving tonight for the milkman, that would leave us with an ending balance at the end of the year of 149K. We allocated 100K for marketing services to 100K for marketing services to some marketing services or to Engage Franklin, and then we put in 15,000 for our billboards. And then 20,000 for legal fees and licensing. So I wanted to put that in front of everybody with tonight. Engage Franklin will be presenting to us. Car Collective, they asked us to move them to December. So, any questions before we move forward on the budget?
What is the timing on going forward?
John, when is this will be approved?
It's in the budget now, so if that was approved last night, let's have to vote to approve last night.
Okay, so I think the point I think we need to do is we need to approve the milkman invoice, and then I think come up in once that's approved, and at the end of December, beginning of January, maybe we ask for to see where and maybe we start putting that in the every month over the budget, so we see how much earnings we have in there at the time. That was my thought. But since it's approved, I think we can then start seeing. I think there's some money coming in at the tail end of the year, and then I think with that discuss.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, 612. Closing the budget refresher. Item number 4. H. Franklin.
Hi. You've all met me before. I'm Laura Nelson, and I am the executive director for the and so thank you for the opportunity for the prospective budget allocation. Appreciate that. And in anticipation of that, I wanted to let you guys know exactly what Engage Franklin is capable of. We've talked about a lot of logistics with regard to room fun stuff yet. So in this presentation, I have, if you want to kind of take one down and pass them around, I have outlined here one right there. I think there might be. I'm going to run this over to you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Plenty there.
Yeah, there should be.
Printed one short.
One short, do you need one?
I am one short, but that's okay.
We've got extras.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, thank you very much.
So you need,
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
so you need,
Beautiful. Thank you. So the first, basically what I wanted to do is, there's the image heavy stuff here that I'll walk through with you guys. And toward the end, as you saw that I kind of distributed to you guys via email, By the way, Barb, yours got returned to me, the email address. So
I've been having some issues in the last 2 days.
yeah, so I just apologize. It certainly wasn't intentional to.
That's okay, yeah. Some reason.
So in this outline here, we have the image heavy portion, and then we have the action plan that's actually written out chronologically, like that Word document that's 5 months, right? So what I would intend to do beginning January of 2023 is kind of start to activate these tourism dollars in a, beginning with what is a traditional sense that a destination marketing organization would activate these dollars, kind of getting the tourism 101 stuff, collateral materials, you know, visitors guides, things like that, and then moving into what makes Franklin extremely special and really captivating whatever audiences that we can to bring them to the area and spend their money. So the first page here, I think, is the most important, actually. The board, commission, and city strategic action plan. It's important in my time, like it's been almost 2 months here. The biggest thing that's come to light is that I feel like we need to have a collective table where the city, representation from the city, representation from the commission, and representation from stakeholders in the industry all sit together to make decisions happening. But the reason that there's been, I feel like that the reason that it's been a stifled initiative is because not everybody is in the same place at the same time and rowing in the same direction. So I feel like that's step number one in this process, and I'm excited to be a part of it. So the board makeup that I outlined in our last officio, voting ex officio, I want to be specific about that these are voting positions. Ex officio from city council, voting ex officio from the commission, and then representation of all stakeholders in the tourism community, including our hotel representatives, people from both the existing and new developments, of course, and then the places that people in the largest quantity of individuals. So, and we wouldn't, also we don't want to forget about the people who are part of the secondary income collection that happens in our like gas stations and restaurants and things like that, but I feel like those can happen at other tables. So when this board comes to shape, which should be this month, entirely, I have a list and I have a bunch of verbal yeses from individuals who are ready and excited to do this. So when this comes to action, it'll end up being a strategic action plan like you would do for a corporation or any action. It'll end up being a strategic action plan like you would do for a corporation or any company that's trying to decide, or municipality, really, organization that's trying to get their ship sailing in the right direction, right? So it would be a group of people who come together and decide what goals and objectives will be committed to in 1, 3, 5, and beyond years. So the thing I really want to focus on is the fact that this is going to be a board that's made up of everybody. It's not going to be a voice that's unique. You know, this table right here, that the commission would still be the ones in charge of making these decisions. So that's step one, is making sure that we have the right people at the table and going in the right direction. Step two in the second page is a very seemingly simple step, but I think it's a piece that's been missing here, both for locals, for businesses, and for those outside of the community to understand what Franklin has to offer specifically. That's a visitor's guide. That'll be my first initiative, just because it'll help me to gather a list of stakeholders, people who'll be interested in, advertising to people outside of the community about what Franklin has to offer and what their business has to offer. It also serves to people outside of the community about what Franklin has to offer and what their business has to offer. It also serves the purpose in the larger sense when it comes to recruiting sporting events and large meetings and conferences, because people who book these types of events, these larger types of events, are used to seeing these types of pieces of collateral to show you as a unique destination. Larger types of events are used to seeing these types of pieces of collateral to show you as a unique destination in and of yourself that has a lot to offer, right? So it's just, this is a basic tool that would be really at the top of the list for the initiatives. The reason I pictured the Wisconsin Visitor Center at the bottom is because we would be distributing it outside of this community. So it would be in all of the hotels and restaurants, of course, but then it would also be in the welcome centers at the thresholds of the state and at pinpoints in the community. And that's a really standard practice. It's easy to do. And then, of course, it would be stocked in the different visitor centers that are in other destinations that are housing on the to-do list. And then the next page is the website, because obviously you can't just have collateral anymore. Everything's digital, and that's the primary way of communicating what you're about, and it's also the most adaptable. So the idea would be to polish and get the website activated as soon as possible. Whether it's this, I don't know what been able to look up at Celebrate Franklin. I'd like to activate the URL of engagefranklin.com or .org, connected with that as well, just because I feel like it has a more interactive approach in the branding. But the point is, I want to ensure that this is full of correct, accurate, and complete information, attractions, surrounding communities that have attractions people would be willing to travel to as well, to make sure that when somebody sees this website, they get excited about coming.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Did we get rid of Celebrate?
That's where I grabbed the screenshot. Yeah, it's still up. It has a lot of cool, it has like video and things like that. A lot of it is locally focused, so I would integrate it with a lot more of different assets that would be attractive to people from outside of the community as well. Because, there's a lot of depiction of parades and really cool stuff, which shows that, Franklin is a really great place to live. But at the same time, people attend parades in their own community, right? So it would include those things, because obviously there's a corporate aspect of it as well. But I would want to expand it to ensure that people who have never been to Franklin before see it as a unique destination, and not like one that's in also their own hometown. So there's that. This is a really big part of launching any entity, is to make sure that the people in the community understand who you are, what you're trying to do, and why you're trying to do it. Because if you want people to accept visitors in this community and feel like tourism is a friend of theirs, I feel like they need to fully understand it. So there would be a local awareness campaign that we would invest dollars in to make sure that the community feels like it's a part of the destination that we're marketing to people in groups and individuals. So that one's important as well. And then this is just, again, this is marketing 101, a digital and social media campaign. I have access to interns that are ready, willing, and able to initiate these types of things too, so that we have the voice of myself, but also a younger voice, that they're ready and able to activate these different platforms and have them be unified. So that's later in the presentation, because I feel like we have to get our ducks in a row and have our base level first. So, and that will be continuous, as you see in the narrative portion of this. It's continuous. It's something that's always going on and always being invested.
These are interns that are funded by you, or
yeah, it'll be funded by the organization. Yep. And I mean,
funded by you, or
yeah, it'll be funded by the organization. Yep. And I mean, it'll start small. It'll be one intern at $10 an hour for 10 hours a week, something like that. So it wouldn't be a huge investment, but somebody that would kind of sink their claws into it. And until we have that person, would kind of sink their claws into it. And until we have that person, or until we have an individual who's prepared to do those things, I'll do it myself. I've done them before, so I certainly don't want to, spend all my time on Twitter, because I feel like I could be catching bigger fish, but at the same time, until that my owner at least established the platform for it. And here's where we get into the fun stuff. This is the stuff I really want to sink my teeth into, and the stuff that I think is really going to impact the economy. The Sports ETA Symposium and FAM Tour. This is an organization that has hundreds of rights holders that are part of where we can attend, have access to the request for proposals, and see where we fit. And then, of course, there's networking involved and proposal writing involved. But then the FAM Tour portion of it, for anybody who's not, who hasn't heard that term before, it's a familiarity tour. It means you invite familiarity tour. It means you invite, whatever primary stakeholders you think may actually want to invest in, sending their rights their rights event to this area. And then we'd show them around. We would have them tour the facilities. We'd have them stay overnight. We'd have them dine in our restaurants. We'd have them understand exactly what stay overnight. We'd have them dine in our restaurants. We'd have them understand exactly what Franklin has to offer and why we're the best event. And we're not talking events that'll be like a couple hundred people. It's more like 10,000, stuff like that. So then that's also where Engage Franklin comes into play with making sure that experience, well-rounded. So, I'm also actually already in talks with the Midwest Golf Show to come here for their March event, and we're trying to figure out how to prospect and coordinate that so that it would be an experience. Next is meetings and conventions. Obviously, of meeting space available. It's not large in comparison to most traditional conference spaces, but it is useful. So we can attract quarterly and annual meetings at the Polish Center. We can obviously host corporate events at Lux with the added bonus of having that activity there. And then we have 2 times. So I figure why not capitalize on all of that and see what fits best. And then obviously have somebody to make people feel welcome and coordinate logistics as well. And then the last one is it's potentially the largest portion of this circumstance. If you look at the short-term rental research, I've been in talks with, they state according to their data that in the past 12 months, there have been $22 million of revenue going through short-term rental properties. We don't know where these are, we don't know who's doing them, and we don't know I don't know if they're being taxed or if the city is actually benefiting from this large amount of revenue. But I feel like I would be the right full-time person to research if I'm connected to all the different resources, both in the tourism realm and beyond, that could kind of uncover what this is and see how the city of Franklin can either, harness its energy and understand it better, but certainly. And then the last one, I don't know if we'd get to this in the first year, but we'd certainly research it. But we need a visitor center. We need someplace that people can go and access information, all the different things, the digital assets, the visitors guides, the interaction. Once we get people here, they need a place to go. We need, a lot of people also enjoy having a welcome presence there where you can receive information and have conversations. This is also where we would have ourselves housed. You notice there's wheels on this one that I have pictured. We would want to house ourselves where the visitors are, and we would want to ensure that if the visitors, for example, are at the Rock Complex at Ballpark Commons, that they understand that other places in the city exist as well to go and enjoy and see, that nobody's on an island. If they're over at any other particular space in the community while an event is going on, they need to understand everything that it has to offer. So that's why that's pictured in that sense. Understand everything that it has to offer. So that's why that's pictured in that sense. So you're welcome to, I'm not going to obviously go through the written narrative. That's all month by month and how I would spend it. You have a budget template that's empty because I don't know what I have to spend. So empty because I don't know what I have to spend. But all of it would be allocated appropriately, and each one of these could be activated to its fullest extent in this chronological order based on the amount that's going to be budgeted. So if you guys have questions, that's going to be budgeted. So if you guys have questions about my experience in the past, I think I've talked to you all about it individually, or have any questions about how I would activate this and in what order and when you can.
Got a couple questions. So for visitors, according to what you've got here, you've got that, so we have it scheduled for printing in September for the next year. When would you start on that? How long do you think it would take to get that? Are you anticipating that the ad revenue would be a break even, or do you anticipate that? And what are your thoughts on it?
So it all depends on how much I have for startup, right? So if I am relying on advertising revenue, then it would have to be printed later in the year for the following year. And inevitably, it should be a self-sustaining or profitable project. It always has past, right? So they pay into the publication, obviously, and then it's a large enough destination where it can be plenty of pages where it would end up being a lucrative circumstance, we wouldn't necessarily be gouging. We just really want to produce this. That's why we're a nonprofit entity, right? But we do want to sustain it so that we can cover our shipping costs and maximize the project, right? So I think that if it were initially funded, I could have this out sooner for the year. I budgeted conservatively so that I could end up relying on the advertising revenue to probably break even the first year, and then in years consecutive to that would end up being a small profit. But then we would utilize that profit for the following year to expand.
Are you anticipating you would be the person doing the sales of that?
Yeah, I've done it before in a community of similar size, and I feel like it's a good way to actually establish rapport with businesses. I think it's a really good way
It's a good way to get out and
Yeah,
actually see
and
what's there, develop a relationship.
Exactly. I look forward to the conversation. With the dollar signs in my eyes, I'm more so going to be like, how can I help? You know what I mean? And how can we best position you for success when
And then could you just expand a little bit on as far as the scope and maybe details and timeline on local tourism awareness campaign?
Yeah, I feel like that should be pushed out to the community. That all of these stakeholders, both municipal, those of you who are volunteers, who are professionals sitting on this commission, and then the stakeholders of the community have joined forces with a voice and with goals and initiatives that they're going to be excited to put forth. So this will be, I'm excited to get it going. I'm happy to draft it. I'm happy to do the press release. I'm happy to reach out to other local news sources statewide for it. But really, it'll be the voice of the board. So that's the idea, is that this group of people who we collect and have at this table, come up with what Engage Franklin is as the tourism entity of this commission and of the city, and then the city gets to know about it. So I feel like it really shines a positive light on the city itself, on progress with this commission, and also with the stakeholders who are at the table, coming to light on the city itself, on progress with this commission, and also with the stakeholders who are at the table coming to the same table for cooperation. So that's what it will be. I will do a press release locally. There will be a social media presence. That's where we're going to initially start the social media presence, because I feel like that's the number one place to start the social media presence, because I feel like that's the number one place to start, is at home, right? So that people understand what we're doing here, why we're doing it. Without going into too much detail, obviously. It'll be a fun and exciting thing. And then, after that, I think it'll be the voice of the board of Engage Franklin, saying, here's what we're doing for the community and how we're going to bring economic impact. Because I don't think the community here understands, in a broad sense, how big of an impact tourism appropriately marketed can make, and how big of an impact. I feel like it's
One last one, and anybody else can jump in. We've talked about this in the past, and I don't know what's ever come of it, but are you going to assemble a list of events and venues and things like that that will be
my fact finding with right? So as soon as we have all of that information, that will be assembled in this one piece of collateral, which is a side note. But all that information gathering and all of those relationship building circumstances lead into that, right? So I will then have direct connection with all of the people who are planning things, and then it can be a unified place to promote all of it. And then that'll go out through social, through digital, all the traditional sources, but then also it'll be just, everybody will have one place to go for this information, and it's literally, you don't have to peel through garbage pickup or anything like that to get there. It's like one place to go for everything fun to do.
As a follow-up to that, at the local awareness campaign, other than listing events, do you see Engage Franklin as also supporting financially some of the events that go on in the city?
Well, I feel like it depends on where our budget is, obviously. It depends. If we have enough funding, absolutely. But we'd certainly dedicate as much human resource as possible to it. And I feel like in community promotion of events, sometimes creating a machine that disseminates information in a way that's super effective and fun and people really enjoy connecting with. It's information in a way that's super effective and fun and people really enjoy connecting with. To be able to utilize that to really blow out local events to the locals as well. Because any of our social media or any of our, web traffic, any of those types of visitors guides even, right? Or anything that we do on an offshoot, that's going to make any of those types of visitors guides even, right? Or anything that we do on an offshoot, that's going to be consumed by people outside of the community, but it's also going to be used inside of the community, right? So we'll ensure that we could have, like, for example, if there's a local organization that is, hosting events, they don't have to pay to have their event promoted in any of our collateral or website or anything like that. It's just a given.
Do you see a benefit to perhaps having an event sponsored by Engage Franklin and having their name on the event? And that would mean a financial commitment. You're going to find that has been, other people know this has been something that I've talked about time, and the response so far has been, well, Engage Franklin should be doing that.
You're talking about like the concert series.
Concert series, the plays, the other things that are going on in the community that are very valuable to the community, and that we could be sponsors of and have that name to that this organization is sponsoring something other than baseball.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I thank you for bringing that up, because I feel like there should be representation of all genres of entertainment in the community. It's not a one note. It's certainly not a one note whatsoever. And some of our prospecting and things like that, it might be focused those lines, but at the same time, when it comes to the general awareness of the destination itself, obviously it's a 360-degree destination that, in all of our collateral pieces, our web pieces, and our voice online, we have to make sure that everybody understands that when you come here, it's not, one thing or two things. It is a ton of different things about sponsoring an event. If we're in a position financially to do so, absolutely. Right now we're seeking sponsorship, right? So that's the position I'm in right now. So I don't want to put the cart before the horse. It would definitely be a priority. And once this is a thriving organization that has an annual budget, definitely be a priority. And once this is a thriving organization that has an annual budget that's predictable, I would say absolutely. Absolutely, we would. That's part of being ingrained in a community and showing faith in the organization, so the people who put all the effort into the wonderful things you're trying to get people to come and enjoy, right? So the wonderful things you're trying to get people to come and enjoy, right? So I agree.
Adding that to the visitor guide, accommodate your thing.
Yeah, well,
Like big.
yeah, I think, other than just a comment or a listing of an event in the visitor's guide, I'm talking about actual
promoting.
this event is sponsored by
Yep.
the tourism or the Engage Franklin. I'm sorry.
If we're in a position to do so, Barb, I'd say absolutely. But I don't see that happening in year one or maybe even
But that will be very good public relations for the citizens of Franklin to know that Engage Franklin is truly supporting some of these very going on in the city and having their name on it.
I understand. Yep, I agree with you.
And I'm not talking about $50,000. I'm talking about, because most of these groups just ask for something to help support them because they are pretty much self-supporting otherwise.
Right.
And they don't get money from
So it could be that arm. I understand that you guys know a lot from the community too, right? Trying to, where are you going to show support in this aspect or this, and trying to diversify the reach of the, this commission and the arms out into the community. So I suppose if what you're asking is, would Engage Franklin be a good steward of that? Absolutely. I think it is to do so. We would. Like you said, it's not $50,000, but as we're in our meager beginnings, like many organizations start that way, right? As we're doing that, we're getting our feet on the ground. Obviously, it would be, you'll notice in here, there's a PR line item in my expense. Obviously, it's there for a reason. Or there's also a sponsorships line item where I feel as though it's important to reach out to the community and share the wealth, so to speak, right? And help them feel supported. I don't feel like we're there initially, but is the desire there? Yes. Financially, I don't know. I have no idea. That's why I'm here. But
Talking out here.
yeah.
So if you spent $2,500 a year, you could sponsor several things based on what people have come to us and asked for. And I guess I look at it as kind of fulfilling Rock Ventures. I know you've got your foundation. I mean, it's another way that you would be giving back to the community, and that we would have instant feedback we could tell residents this is sponsored with you, portion of tourism.
Yeah, and I get that. So when I see in my initial presentation last month, it demonstrated that there will be a future 501c3 aspect of it, probably in year 5 or forward. I feel like that's an important part to complete the cycle of an extremely well-rounded organization. I feel like there should be some well-rounded organization. I feel like there should be some public mission. I feel like there should be some private, the stakeholders on the board. I feel like there should be a nonprofit aspect of it, which would be like a community-based nonprofit that would be Engage Franklin, and then I feel like there should be charitable organizations. And then that's the 4 legs of Franklin, and then I feel like there should be charitable organizations. And then that's the 4 legs of the school, and I feel like any organization that represents or is connected to all 4 is as ingrained or as, firing on all cylinders as they could be. So that's in the future plans. Again, in the launching stages, all of this would be decided at plans. Again, in the launching stages, all of this would be decided at a strategic planning session, right? Where we have commission members, council members, and stakeholders all sit down together and decide of the budget that we have to work with for this year and what we anticipate for future years as this hopefully snowballs for this year and what we anticipate for future years as this hopefully snowballs into something amazing, right? Then we can decide which strategically we can put first, which ones are for year 3, which ones are year 5. And then, for example, if we have a budget of 2,500, as you say, for local sponsor committee, I'd say, who fields all of the requests and then votes on it officially, right? Like anybody should. So it should never be in the hands of one individual. It should be in
Has the organization been incorporated yet?
So not quite, because it will be by,
Because it was my understanding, and I missed that meeting that you were at,
I apologize.
that it was going to be a 501c3 from the very beginning.
Yes, I misspoke. It's never intended to be a 501c3 because it shouldn't be a charitable organization. It should either be a 501c4 or 501c6, right? As you're well. And I misspoke. We are incorporated. We just don't have our nonprofit status active yet. So we are incorporated as an entity. I did misspeak on that, which is why I so rudely tried to interrupt you there.
Okay.
But anyway, so we will be active as a nonprofit entity certainly by January 1. And that entity is discussed with our nonprofit attorney to understand the decision myself, because in my CVB history convention and bureau history, I was a 501c6. So to understand the difference, she basically said a 501c4 may operate in any way a 501c6 may operate. There are just less restrictions. That was the elevator speech I was given, and I fully trust her. But if you guys want a more detailed explanation on the difference, I'm happy to get her draft going.
Then I guess my next question is, have the bylaws been drafted?
Yes.
Engage.
Yes,
And
but not
we'll see.
submitted yet.
Drafted.
Yes,
Engage.
yes,
And
but not
we'll see.
submitted yet.
But we haven't seen.
No, and they haven't been submitted for the nonprofit application yet. They've been drafted, and I've been waiting on the temperature of the room of this group. You can certainly see the bylaws before they're submitted and approve them, obviously.
Everything that you,
Before they're submitted and approve them, obviously.
everything that you, and everything that she has sent to.
Yeah. And if you have interest in viewing the bylaws, they're very traditional with regard to a tourism entity. Just that you've probably seen in your walking life, Barbara, and that you've probably also, Ed, and also in the sense that it's written out, almost drafted as a template of all the organizations that have existed for this purpose over a long period of time. If you have specific questions, I'm well versed in what we have on the papers, for example, like the board members and the makeup and the terms and all of that. Questions, I'm happy to answer them now. Otherwise, I can certainly get you the document.
I think if there's anything that we either talk about it now, like, I'm hoping that we can prepare a vote for next meeting if we want to contribute. So that's where I'm saying an answer.
My only suggestion, bylaws would be because most of it is boilerplate. Make sure that you change things so that they're relevant, current, but also how you want to operate the entity. Because a lot of times people say, okay, I got this, and 2 years down the road, somebody, you're not doing what it says in the bylaws. Well, that's not how we really operate. So ensure that it reflects, gives you the flexibility that you want.
Right, thank you. See, I was,
want.
right, thank you. See, I was, and one of the reasons for my hesitation with, you know, which should come first, the chicken or the egg, because I really want the strategic action plan and the board of directors behind this organization to thrive, to understand those bylaws. I don't want to draft them on their behalf. Does that make thrive? To understand those bylaws. I don't want to draft them on their behalf. Does that make sense? I mean, these people are going to be donating their time, and they're going to be really leading this organization. And I want them to be able to have a stake in what it says on the paper. Again, it's mostly very traditional. There's nothing that's going to shock anybody or make anybody think. Again, it's mostly very traditional. There's nothing that's going to shock anybody or make anybody think that, you know, whoa, that's a red flag. It's all very standard stuff. But I agree that, you know, I mean, you can change bylaws down the road, but should you want to have to, right? Future practice, right? Yeah, and
You know, I found out that South Suburban, your directors could change the bylaws. At least that's what I
Oh,
was.
the board of directors.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what I was told.
Yes.
And in my instance, I had to get 2/3 of the membership to vote. So those little kind of things, make sure that you had that.
I just want to make one comment about the visitor's guide. You know, there are organizations, probably familiar with them too, who do this sort of thing for chambers, for community, which would take a lot of effort off your plate. Would that be something you would look at? Okay.
Respect business owners, I want to be face to face with all the organization heads. I want to be the one who they're trusting with their investment, and I want to be the one that they come to if they want to see something happen differently. I feel like it's part of being ingrained in a community. And I grew up in Racine, and I recently came back to the community, and I feel like I'm starting, but itself will be the impetus for me to actually go door to door, speak to all the stakeholders in this.
Can I suggest that, or just comment, that I think the chamber is going to be doing something again, perhaps in the next year, normally it's about a 2-year cycle.
For the solicitation cycle?
Right.
Well, and that's why I don't want to rush the circumstance either, because I feel like, well, they did theirs. I think they'll be producing in 23 here, and we'll be producing in 24.
Oh, so this would be
It would be
24.
staggered. Yeah, it would be for the 2024. That's why I'm taking the year to like lay the groundwork, you know, and really get everything done correctly. I don't want to rush it when it's unveiled. It should be a wow piece for the community, something they're really proud of. So thank you for that. I do appreciate it. And, you know, in my previous work with Oak Creek, I worked with the chamber on, you know, our spread and things like that. And I understand. But I also, as somebody purchasing advertising, I don't always, I would rather deal with the person than a third party for the most part, just in my consumer experience. So I want to honor that, especially on the first few cycles.
Go back to the chairman's statement of wanting to maybe make a decision in December on this.
Yeah.
On this.
Yeah, so, yeah, I have a couple questions. But yes, that was the thought, was that this is most of our budget of either marketing or engagement. I think the purpose is to get this started right away for January. I think the one questions that I have is working on the budget. I'm concerned with the upfront spend. Most of our budget is not offered to the tail end of the year. Would your proposed action plan change if only 50% of contribution is given to you starting in January or February, and then the balance?
What would be, I mean, it would depend. So yes, it would. But the way I see it, there are certain things that can happen right away. There are certain things that can happen right away. That's my time, and it's being subsidized from an outside source. So, gratefully, very gratefully. And so that could get started right away. Things like the local tourism awareness campaign wouldn't be nearly as large. There are ways there are ways to activate social media accounts on a free basis, but I feel like that's really just, I don't feel like it's truly activating the full power of that. You'll notice on the footnote of this narrated document, I have two things. One, allocation timeline, which, to your point, I would request. So, number one, I feel as though this commission and anybody it contracts with, whether it be me or anybody else, would really benefit from quarterly allocation. And I understand the way it works and that the city has their amount that they pay themselves first and then the remainder in your position, which I'm not. But if I were, I would consider requesting from the councilor, from the mayor, whomever's in charge of the decision, that there be a quarterly allocation in line with what is appropriately forecasted, so that you guys can activate these dollars throughout the year and not one specific period of time, and not have a full understanding of exactly what extent to which you can invest. So I just, in other communities where I've worked, it's been something that's worked extremely well. Obviously, people have different reasons for, different allocations and different timing, but at this, for this purpose, I feel like this is a predictable amount of money over an annual cycle, with the exception of something like a pandemic, which hopefully we're all the way out of the woods on that. And then anything can be righted up in Q4. So that's just something I wanted to mention, because I feel like everybody can operate more smoothly if they have forecasted income on a quarterly basis. And it would be important for the activation of the dollars if you were to contract with me, because I feel like we could really, really bust some heads right away.
Right now, to your point, if I'm looking, projected end year is 2,649. Just playing our agreement, about $103,000, $103K that would
After we pay the
building.
after we pay this,
Yep, 3,000 amount.
bill the city gives.
The city gives us the
Taxes.
balance. And that's if we get the full. So that's why, like I said, waiting to see. Talk to Denise. See.
What I heard Laura say is that even if it wasn't the whole 100K,
Yeah.
60 or 70, that would still leave.
We would have to work with
We had
the
to
mayor
figure it
to
out.
to cut out income.
Because we don't collect it all at one
They
time
don't
either.
for it.
Because we don't collect it all at one
They
time
don't
either.
for it, no.
So
No, and chances are we're not going to get it till a year from
I think they collected twice, I think what Lance said last meeting. So that's where it doesn't come to us, because normally the city doesn't get theirs until the second payment.
the other thing that's important in my mind,
Second payment.
the other thing that's important in my mind anyway, is I wouldn't want to sign an agreement that didn't have some kind of metrics that we can judge the effectiveness.
So is that an option to
Absolutely.
utilize our, see how our money is being spent, or pick and choose? how our money-
Absolutely. Yeah, I would intend 100%. So in having seats on the board of this commission and the council, and this isn't the only way to have the played, one of the many. This budget, I included the template because it is so inclusive of literally every dollar per month that's being spent on what. And then, of course, just like any organization that's doing marketing, there would be impact statements, data-driven results, how many people were reached, how many people clicked, et cetera, so yes, absolutely. And I wrote into the narrated portion also, and this can change, so whatever, that we would have a monthly board meeting where literally, like, there would be every financial statement in every form. There would be this budget allocated dollars month to date and how it, appropriates. There would also be a general ledger. Every check that's written is overseen very tightly and transparently by everybody on the board and therefore everybody on the council. And then I wrote in here quarterly meetings where I would present the results. Now, I say quarterly, it could be different if you guys felt like monthly and you wanted to see what's up on a more regular basis. But like, you know, if you want me to, as often as you'd like me to report, I can produce metrics to show you what progress is made.
And you have a legal team that put this together?
Yeah. Yep.
So our legal team will have to work with their legal red line and explain it to them. And if
I'll
we want
forward
to
you her information, middleman.
Okay.
Howdy. Okay.
So the only other question I have is, other than us and Rock Venture, who else are you, how many, I don't know, right, for funds?
Well, I'm not soliciting anybody. I feel like I should operate within my means. However, I have had conversations with individuals that have, for private funding or grant funding. Like, for example, I put the Department of Tourism logo on the bottom of the visitor center because there's a grant for tourism information centers. They can compensate you up to, you know, $15,000 for whatever you put into it, and I intend to apply. You up to, you know, $15,000 for whatever you put into it, and I intend to apply for all of those. There will be state grant funding. I'll look into private grants as well. You know, we are 501c4, not 3, so we can't be a charitable organization receiving those types of funds.
What do you mean by that?
Meaning that anybody who donates or sponsors funds, this organization cannot write it off on their taxes.
Got it.
So it's a little less desirable
Yep.
for people to fund us. But at the same time, I've also sat down with other people who are willing to, if necessary, invest dollars in the organization. I'm not as traditional as possible. You know what I mean? I prefer it to be a city venture at the arms of the council with stakeholders involved, and I'd like it to be an even playing field. So the minimal amount of private investment possible is what I'm seeking. I want it to be for the community, to be a private venture. Because then it's not true to what it is. It's not a tourism entity. So I'm seeking to make it as publicly funded as possible through commission, through state grants, like that. Because that's what I'm used to operating. That's what I like operating. More effective.
Advertising,
And
an important part too, though. So
Advertising.
revenue.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But then that's it within a project base. I consider that not funding the organization, but funding the project.
So, I'm anticipating that we wouldn't be limited just by the geographic area of Franklin. The hotels are spilled over in Oak Creek and neighboring areas, and we get restaurants in Greendale and Greenfield if they want to participate in like the visitor's guide and that the
Sure. Any entity that would be considered an asset to a visitor to Franklin. But I feel like it would be important to segment a little bit so that Franklin gets highlighted more so. That it's understood what's within the city of Franklin and what we're actually promoting, and then these are other ancillary places you may find within drive time that so there wouldn't be any for example, if someone in Oak Creek wanted to take out the inside back and the inside front cover, I might think twice about that. Guide, it's Franklin guide, right? So I want to think very carefully, and that's also why I like the idea of having my hands on the production and placement of ads, because I feel like it should be carefully done and with the community's best part. I mean, Oak Creek, where they're being showcased more so, right? People would be welcomed because it's an asset to our visitors and it's important, but at the same time, it would be welcomed within a certain.
designing your content, who do you plan on using for that?
Well, I would have to get bids. I want to, I could design it myself if we're on a shoestring budget, but I prefer tourism. I've used Barnett. I've used a couple of others that are known within the community, or I'm not community, state, for being great with seeking a brand, a destination through collateral pieces. So I'm not singularly focused. That's the most recent firm that I use, but I'd get 3 or more bids to make sure that it's competitive, and to make sure that it's an organization that represents Wisconsin tourism, has a track record. Yeah. Yeah.
Franklin.
Mhm.
Get that right.
Just to throw it out there, I just had an extremely interesting meeting I had, and found organizations like Johnson are very impressive. So they might be an idea and student base, which is
Right. I'm down with that. 100%. And that's another part of making that the first page of my entire presentation is practice, because I can be the boots on the ground and the hands doing the work, but I really want them to incorporate.
okay. So I think again, based off the budgets, we put $20K in for legal fees to go over whatever contracts we need. The thought was to reach out to whoever helped the Franklin Field deals. And I think it would be nice to kind of just talk about it. I think process everything that was tonight and maybe talk about it next meeting.
I'm good with that.
I would be respectful, and if you guys wanted to talk about it in private, or if you have further questions, let me know when you'd like me to be present.
Yeah, so there, I mean, anybody can send her mail, ask any questions. I would maybe just say, like, so that everybody understands the questions you might have, maybe send them to John. Good with that? The questions you might have, maybe send them to John. Good with that? And then John can kind of communicate them to somebody to communicate to Laura, so that everybody can understand what everyone's thinking and getting the question answered correctly. So I think that's the best way to do it. I'll do answered correctly. So I think that's the best way to do it. I'll do my best to call Denise and see where our budget lies as close as I can to the December. So I'll bring an updated one of these. And I'll do my best updated one of these. And I'll do my best to do that. And hopefully by then the 150 check should be able to be processed, so that'll be taken. Or we can kind of just. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you. Okay.
Thank you all for
701, closing Engage Franklin. Item number 5, we were going to skip until that December meeting. They've asked to come in and discuss with us at that time. So thank you, John, for printing this for us. I had John print this for us, and I thought maybe we could go over it. We had some conversations about if we would pursue Engage Franklin and where they're at right now. Do we need to make any changes to this? The concern that I had was on page. Page is that? Page 2, item number 4. It's at the bottom of the screen, at the bottom of the page. Sorry. I like it's staring at a computer screen. It stated for the Engage Franklin that it spends at least 51% of its revenues on tourism development. Fine. The name of the 501c6 is anticipated to be Engage Franklin. And then it states that the ROC and MMB assert the annual based payment naming rights. Thus, it's anticipated that Engage Franklin is created. Engage Franklin will make further payments to MMB as conditions to the naming rights. If the Franklin Tourism does not create a 501c6 Engage Franklin, or if Engage Franklin does MMB for the value of the naming rights, ROC and MMB terminate agreement for convenience. If Rock and MMB terminate convenience, MMB may seize or use or display the name or in connection with the stadium. Tourism Commission will be the payment of past dues and amounts owed. Amounts due to MMB for benefit provided to the state of. Once Engage Franklin is an approved 501c6, the Tourism Commission may assign the agreement to Engage Franklin, including all rights and obligations. That worry anybody else?
A lot.
Yeah, right?
I mean, it sounds like. They have us.
Damned if you do.
Well,
There's
I mean,
a couple of things. First of all, Engaging Franklin, as she described it, is not a 501c6, it's a C4.
so that's the first thing. Yep.
The second thing is, if we contract with, whether it's a promotion entity, they do not have to, they're not bound by that 51% spent on tourism. We are. That's my understanding of it.
Yep.
So they could spend 75% on labor and or subcon that we are. That's my point.
The other thing in here I want to state before we talk more is that it does state somewhere in here joint employee.
Yeah, that's,
And it states in here also, reading, not finding that, it states Lobby Tourism Center during the agreement, Franklin Tourism Commission shall have a tourism center in the lobby of Rock Ventures office building, and provided that the Franklin Tourism pays all expenses. So this is just in there, but I'm going to state that
it's
not
been
valid
understood that we're
anymore.
not going to do that
Yeah.
for the short term.
Definitely not valid.
What page was that on?
Isn't 4 right above Engage Franklin?
talking
Okay.
about establishing,
I guess the point I'm trying to make
it doesn't
here,
need to be both.
I think the point that I'm trying to make here is I don't want to talk to mix anybody's way of viewing this, but I feel like this has to be corrected in order to move forward any of that.
Supposed to pay for and support the new one they're starting. It
Yes.
just needs to be one or the other.
Yep. But here's the thing.
I think that's in, there's an appendix, it's not in.
So somewhere attached to this, there is something that states that we formed or agreed, and that will service both tourism and Engage Franklin.
That's in schedules. Either C or B, which are not here. The only thing I had here was Schedule B was those and stuff, and then Schedule C, additional benefits. I think that's where.
Also, I don't want anybody to look at page 7, but there's a contract review no later than March 3rd. Whether the agreement has been working for the parties, or the parties should consider renegotiating the agreement. So that's another thing, is that I would hate for us to go into this and that both parties aren't happy with the Franklin Field. We go into giving money to Engage Franklin, and yet we get Franklin Field pulled out from underneath us in the long run, when we all feel that that is owed to the city. The city. The city. So I mean, I don't know how you guys feel, but I think we should probably email Nate. I don't even think this is a Laura thing because she's not a Rock Venture employee.
No, and Nathan has reached out to me about doing a summary of the past year. Nathan has reached out to me about doing a summary of the past year and discussion of what we want to see happen next year.
Yeah, I think it's time to set up a meeting and focus on the agreement and then talk probably about that.
And what I left him with was
On the agreement and then talk probably about that.
And what I left him with was, we were meeting tonight. I did not set up a meeting, so we had this meeting.
Yep.
And then we wanted to get this approved so that we'd be.
So I can send bullet points if you guys don't mind. If you guys want to know, I mean, if there's anything else that's bothering you guys with the agreement. But I can send bullet points to Mark for you to talk to Nathan.
Okay.
And then also take into consideration a big chunk of this fact that they hired without the intention of having a joint employee.
Yeah, I'll find that other appendix.
Yeah.
Because I know there was a
No, that's
section that
fine.
talked about.
Yeah, there's a joint employee. So I think the concerns I have is a lot on the fact that we're coming up to a contract review. Yeah, God, I would hate to give this funding and then they pull Franklin.
One of the things we had last year, concerns about them not living up to the. I
Yep.
think they have done a good job in the past year, up to their portion, with the exception of the tourism. And we jointly agreed we were not going to pursue that. We didn't have a place.
I mean, the other thing too, it states that we can give. I'm not saying I want to. Once Engage Franklin is approved, the Franklin Tourism Commission may assign the agreement to Engage Franklin.
Which I think she incorporated in terms of this.
Yeah. So that's an option. Yeah. So that's an option too. She would have to facilitate agreement and then report back to us.
Correct.
So if I can simplify that from my understanding, so you're saying that it's possible that the commission, the tourism commission, just give the money to Engage Franklin and step back.
Yes. And then make sure that the whole agreement.
The hands of Engage Franklin. The hands of Engage Franklin.
Hands of Engage Franklin.
And not us,
As-
or not you, I
With
should
them
say.
as an agent of.
Mhm.
And then what would happen is they would make sure that our bathroom signage is done, make sure that our promotions are done, our advertising board when you walk in, we get press release of Franklin on the Jumbotron.
Mhm.
Have a giveaway. The mayor is unhappy with not having purchased the store. She would
Right.
Actually contracted.
Rock Ventures.
The Rock is funding. Rock Ventures funding already. She stated when we were our first meeting was that they've given her the first X amount of dollars to start, but then go on and,
They were looking for her to be funding,
yeah, they were
funding based on her
based,
activity.
yes.
Because that's where I'm sort of,
Like, question why I stated as briefly funds, because at the end of the day, if not us or the Rock, not really getting through grants. So the way it could happen is if she succeeds and we don't give her any funding, grants. So the way it could happen is if she succeeds and we don't give her any funding, she could still move forward by getting grants, private funding, whatever.
some of those grants are only for 501.
I don't know anything about that.
That's what, that,
Forward by getting grants, private funding, whatever.
some of those grants are only for 501.
I don't know anything about that.
That's what, that's why I went through a lot of grant process. You do not give it to boards. So that's a, I'm like, I didn't give it to boards. So that's a, I'm like, I didn't want to say anything. I mean, I don't know why
I
I chose
think-
the C4 route versus C3. I mean,
You just,
And then-
C4s and C6s just don't pay sales tax, property tax. Well, 6s, C6,
German Fest, for example, was not eligible for any other venue grants state because they're C4. I got it because I was a C3. So once you could disqualify, so I like she talks about going to those visitors, or, you know, circle walking. There's a lot of, but they may deny that because of the status. I don't know.
The C4s and C6s, they can,
But my concern is, I guess my concern is, okay, she's an employee right now. Next year, you're gonna have to make up their wage. And what? You know,
So-
is that money kind of? We're gonna be keeping her, giving her money, and
So-
it's like you could burn that 100,000
So I
as a
think
visitor.
this is why I brought this, is because I think in order to get this right, in order to do this, we need to get this right. And in order to do this, we need to get this right. And I think that, to your point, towards agreements, like how this money is being funded. Like, unless we trust the fact of handing somebody X amount of $100,000, essentially. You know, if we trust somebody to use that money in our best interest, I don't know if that's how we all feel.
What comes at an odd time, if in March, say both sides, how do we feel? Maybe we should do that first.
Yeah, it goes back to when I met her and Mike, Joe in a room, and I talked about that this to be talked about. And all they did was cross something out, sent me a review, said, here you go. I will tell you, I don't feel comfortable knowing that it could end the Franklin Field agreement on March. They're not happy, or they're not getting the full funding, or they're seeing that not collecting funds for Engage Franklin. That's not really our employee. We have to protect first before us. That's where I'm hoping by meeting with Nate, hopefully they'll be accommodating, because I think these are changes they need to make based off the decision they made by funding
They're
more.
going to need to make those changes to protect themselves for Engage Franklin. Make those changes to protect themselves for Engage Franklin. And they want to see that work.
That's what I'm stating, is
Yeah.
everybody happy with it? Is everybody happy with the Franklin? Like, that's where we're coming out of that meeting. That might be
Right.
on changes, that meeting. That might be
Right.
on changes. You all have to come in and a vote on that amendment agreement.
Well, I can meet with Nathan as early as next week. Although this sometime.
Yeah. But I think it's better not to talk about Engage Franklin tonight. I think it's better to process it, right? Unless we want to chat a little bit more about it in the agreement portion, I think.
I have one major reservation on the agreement.
On this agreement or this agreement?
Major reservation on the agreement.
On this agreement or this agreement?
the Engage agreement,
Oh, Engage Franklin.
7 years.
This is 7 years.
It is 7 years, but I thought that was set up to coincide with the naming rights.
Well, that's how it's
That's what they say.
postured, yes.
Yeah. So the 7 years, because it's a 10-year deal, right? We're year
10-year
3.
deal with this.
Yeah, we're year 3 of that.
Right.
So it's a 7-year deal leading up to the end of this. But that's the thing, is that there's an out
Right.
in March.
Oh, yes, there is now. I see what you
Want to have some kind of an out regardless, because if you're 2 years in and you say it's not working,
I'm sorry, I don't see, and again, I shouldn't be talking for everybody, but I don't, why we, 7 years. Where I think it should be really life change when we signed this deal with COVID. And I don't think we built that trust factor.
I think it's just my personal opinion, in my experience through New Berlin, they gave Visit Milwaukee 2 years. Through New Berlin, they gave Visit Milwaukee 2 years. And in my estimation, that would be a fair trial. But 7 years is a long, long time.
Well, this is why, sorry,
You think 2 years for Engage? We're not gonna, you think 2 years for Engage? We're not gonna talk about changing the term of this.
You gotta
Once we
make
do
it,
as
you
part
have
of
to
the
make it
work.
long enough that it's worth their while, that they get a fair shake at it.
you have to have them take March out of here.
Okay.
And we have to change the Engage Franklin portion of it, take the weight portion out of it. Yep. And we have to make it like we're so committed. And then in order to do that, then we need to have a legal person look at this document. Because I'm sure I don't want there to be any language that states that we're committed to another certain amount of dollars to determine the funds that go into this situation. Because if COVID or something else comes back and we lock down again, God, we don't, then we're not put into this agreement. We're trying to figure out how to. Right now, we can still afford the Franklin agreement. We wouldn't be able to afford H. Franklin. Something happened.
Franklin Field Agreement. Simply work in there a contract review every year,
Yes.
rather
I
than,
don't-
there's just that March 3rd, 23 deadline.
I'm all about year agreements right
yeah.
now in this day and age. I think they're very common. I just signed last few weeks. This is something to get the ground running. I mean, we met her 3 months ago. So if we want to put our foot in the door in that way,
It could be a review. Terms that stay the same, you agree to that for years.
well, that too, look at the issues we had in year 1. That finally, it was like our continue to hold the hand of getting it done. If Nathan would have been, where would we have been last year?
We wouldn't have made progress.
Exactly. Yeah. So my point in that is, it didn't really start till Nathan was there to make the progress. It was always IOUs. So how we do that going forward, we look at the agreement.
And Nathan,
We look at the agreement.
and Nathan is a staff person at the Rock
Yep.
right now.
Yep.
If he's not next month, then
Yep. Or he shifts positions over and goes to the doghouse somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the intention was that for them, our employees would work with everybody at the Rock to fulfill this agreement. Now that we're not moving forward with our employee, that's where I do think we should think, do we want to give it over?
Okay.
Give it over.
Okay. Set up a meeting with you. And so, John, after I have that meeting, I cannot send summary, but I can send it to you.
Okay. Any other questions?
that point, do you want me to get it out to anybody else?
I think I will send you just a summary of our concerns,
Yep.
stuff of what Ed said, Barb said, all of us said, and then send that to Mark.
Okay.
And then, if it would be nice, once you hear back from Nathan, tell John, and tell him when your meeting is.
Yep.
And then, he'll send you those questions, those those comments, you with them, and then give us a summary, like you've done. So we're doing this right, get it to John. Not breaking any rules, right? Like, okay. 724 closing Franklin Field agreement. Item number 7, voucher approvals. We have one for the $150,000 for the invoice for the Franklin Field agreement. Looks like that's current, right?
Printed that a couple weeks.
Yep. So this is our statement for the year. I need approval.
I would move to approve.
Second?
A second.
Okay, Mark with second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
Now,
you can sign this. You need me to sign it?
you should send it.
And then you give it to John. John will give it to me. Item number 8 is our next meeting. Is everybody available in our next meeting? Is everybody available in December?
As far as I know. Say we got again?
So it's the 3rd, it would be the 21st. I know that's the week of guys, so
Really on Sunday, Saturday, Sunday.
Saturday, Sunday. That's Wednesday.
Actually, fine.
Okay.
So everybody's pushing everything into the early part of the.
Okay. Everybody can do that? All right, so we'll do December 21st at 6 o'clock. I don't know if we can talk about that, but anything else that anybody wants to put on the agenda that week? Other than Carl Collective, Franklin Field?
That'll come before this discussion.
Yes, the Carl Collective will be the first thing. You can tell him what the update it is and give you guys an update on their proposal based off the budget that we have for 20. Does that work for you? Okay. All right. Item number 9 is adjournment.
So Carl and Franklin,
Gage Franklin, actually in this order: Carl Collective, Franklin Field Agreement, Engage Franklin. I'm going to have to get with Sandy, develop some sort of vote for funds for. We can talk.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?